That painting was in fact of Cluny House, the home of the French family here in the very heart of Ireland, in County Roscommon. It's about roughly halfway between the two little villages of Tulsk and Elphin. The painting was in fact by one of the children, William PERCY FRENCH, and it was he in later life was to leave us a heritage of prose, poems, parodies, marvellous watercolours, all of which he incorporated at one time in his life in a one-man show which he travelled throughout the world. Now, there may be only the stones left of the building, but believe me, the memory of PERCY FRENCH and his wonderful songs and all his other talents will last forever.
Oh, Mary, this London's a wonderful sight. When he came for Kitty, she was married to McVitie, and McGee had appropriated Jane. Come home, Paddy Riley,
Just in case any of you were in doubt as to the identity of who I'm speaking about, there were a few reminders. Now, PERCY FRENCH got a very sound education at various schools and colleges in Ireland and England, and we find him eventually entering Trinity College in Dublin to study for his civil engineering degree. Now, let me tell you at this juncture, he never wanted to go to Trinity, and he certainly didn't want to become an engineer. Now, he hadn't arrived in Trinity very long before he became an integral part of the social life of the college. And a feature of the social life were what they called the college smokers. And it was for one of those smokers he was to write his very, very first composition. Now, I'm afraid, not knowing very much about the intricacies of registering copyright, etc., he forgot to do anything about that aspect of it until it was much too late. Now, I think it's an excellent example of early PERCY FRENCH humour, in which he takes a very ordinary, common a garden event and raises it up to the veritable heights of an epic.
Now the sons of the prophet are brave men and bold, and quite unaccustomed to fear. But the bravest by far in the ranks of the Shah was Abdul Bulbul Amir. And the heroes were plenty and well known to fame in the troops that were led by the Tsar. And the bravest of these was a man by the name of Ivan Skivinsky Skivar. One day this bold Russian had shouldered his gun and donned his most truculent sneer. Downtown he did go, but he trod on the toe of Abdul Bulbul Amir. Young man, quoth Abdul, has life grown so dull that you wish to end your career? Vile infidel, no, you have trod on the toe of Abdul Bulbul Amir. So take your last look at sunshine and brook and send your regrets to the Tsar. For by this I imply you are going to die, Mr. Ivan Skivinsky Skivar. Said Ivan, my friend, your remarks in the end will avail you but little, I fear. For you ne'er will survive to repeat them alive, Mr. Abdul Bulbul Amir. Now this bold Mameluke drew his trusty shkabuk with a cry of Allah Akbar, and with murderous intent he ferociously went for Ivan Skivinsky Skivar. Now they fought all that night neath a pale yellow moon. The din, it was heard from afar. Huge multitudes came, so great was the fame of Abdul and Ivan Skivar. As Abdul's long knife was extracting the life, in fact he was shouting huzzah. He felt himself struck by that wily Kalmuck, Count Ivan Skivinsky Skivar. Now a Muscovite maiden her lone vigil keeps by the light of a pale polar star, and the name that she murmurs so oft as she weeps is Ivan Skivinsky Skivar. And a tomb rises up where the blue Danube flows, and engraved there in characters clear. A stranger when passing, please pray for the soul of Abdul Bulbul Amir.
Well, he did eventually get his degrees. He got his BA and his civil engineering degree. And he got a job as an apprentice with a Dublin firm, and eventually went to Cavan with the County Cavan Board of Works, where he was going around surveying claims that had been made for drainage. Those years in Cavan, I believe, were the most formative of his life, because it was then that he really became aware for the first time of all the colourful characters that would inspire so many of his songs and so many of his compositions. When Percy French worked and lived in this lovely area here, his main mode of transport was the jaunty car or the sidecar. And naturally through the years he got into the habit of using the same Jarvie. His name was Paddy Riley. Now, the strange thing about it is Paddy Riley remembers very little about Percy French, or rather remembered very little about Percy French.
He never mentioned Percy French.
But even now, when he'd hear the song, Come Back Paddy Riley to Ballyjinsdup, he knew it was about him, didn't he?
Well, I never knew of him very much to pass much remarks about it. But there was a man living down here. He was, the name of Joe Ford. He was an ex-policeman. And his son, well, he's dead now, Pappy Ford, used to sing the song. And he'd often come. He'd often come in, and he'd sit there, and when he'd be going, he'd sing for them.
Yeah.
But my father never mentioned Percy French no more than any other one, because I'll tell you why. He was just put down as an ordinary man.
Just a fair.
Just, yeah.
One of his fairs.
Yes.
But I can't understand, though, Bridget, is why he didn't, knowing the song was about him. You know, he must have known. He was the only Paddy Riley in Ballyjinsdup, and he must have known the song was about him.
He knew all that, but he didn't give it much heed.
Didn't matter a damn.
Didn't matter a damn, no.
Years later, when Percy French came back and found out he wasn't here, he wasn't on the Jarvies anymore.
I'll tell you what he done. He went for a load with 2 horses and carts for a load to a station in Old Castle. And he got off the cart, tied the horses to something above an Old Castle, and got in on the train and headed over to Scotland.
And just left?
Yeah, he left the horses there and went off.
The Garden of Eden has vanished, they say, but I know the lie of it still. I turned to the left at the bridge of the Nay, and stopped when halfway to Cootill. 'Tis there I will find it, I know sure enough, when fortune has come to my call. The grass, it is green around Ballyjinsdup, and the blue sky is over it all. And tones that are tender and tones that are gruff come whispering over the sea. Come back, Paddy Riley, to Ballyjinsdup. Come home, Paddy Riley, to me. My mother once told me that when I was born, the day that I first saw the light, I looked down the street on that very first morn and gave a great crow of delight. Now most newborn babies appear in a huff and start with a sorrowful squall. But I knew I was born in Ballygymsduff, and that's why I smiled on them all. The baby's a man now, he's toil-worn and tough, still whispers, come over the sea. Oh, come back, Paddy Riley, to Ballygymsduff. Come home, Paddy Riley, to me.
During his lifetime, Percy French travelled throughout the length and breadth of Ireland, and he usually stayed in private homes, guest houses, boarding houses, hotels. Now here's a little letter he wrote from a hotel, a very imposing one, I might add. It was the Central Hotel in Ballybunion in County Kerry, and it was a letter to his wife. And he writes, I enclose £10. I think Ballybunion will be good. We drove from Tarbert, which is the ferry, on Saturday, and the horse broke down about 2 miles from Ballybunion. We transferred our luggage to a turf cart and arrived ingloriously at the Central Hotel. Now, I'm afraid all the hotels that he stayed at weren't as imposing as that, and some of them, in fact, you could only term, let's put it, quaint. Now, one owner of one of these really did exist, genuinely, and Percy French called him my friend Finnegan. He writes, when an artist goes to sketch in the west of Ireland, there's very often trouble in finding a suitable place to stay in. Now, there are lodgings that advertise bed and board for 5 shillings, but you can't tell very often which is the bed and which is the board. Now, generally, I put in a night at Peter Finnegan's hotel. Now, Peter is a very important man in the locality and a very, very dear friend of mine. And though his 4-poster bed is really a tripod, because you see, it needs the least taste of the windowsill to make it a permanent structure. And though by long usage, the hens have established a right of way through the coffee room, these little drawbacks count for nothing. For Peter, to me, is a permanent joy. For instance, we were both looking out of the window one day at a brand new house being built, when Peter remarked to me, you know, it would be a great addition to that house if that gable end was taken away. For instance, another day, another little story, a very angry visitor stormed down the stairs one day and shouted, look at my shoes. I left them outside my door last night and nobody's touched them. That's the sort of hotel we keeps as Finnegan. You could leave your gold watch outside and nobody would touch it. When Percy French travelled throughout Ireland, he obviously kept his heart and his eye wide open. For instance, something happened up here in Donegal, which he tells us went something like this. He says, I was painting out in the wilds of the bogland near Falcarra, up in County Donegal, when an old woman came out of a cottage with, as she said, a cup of tea and a bite of griddle cake for the desolate stranger who was sitting out like a snipe in the bog. Well, he was chatting to her for a while, and of course he had remarked on how the countryside of Ireland at that time seemed to be literally made up of old people and children, with the youth of Ireland having been forced to emigrate. He just happened to say to her, he said, you know, he said, isn't it really beautiful around here? She says, I suppose it is, but you know, it's lonely living when the children is away. He began to realize the emptiness, the loneliness of that woman's life without the children that she might never see again. And he wrote a little piece that I loved so much that I set it to music. And he called it An Irish Mother.
Ah, we slipped drawing water, the old man at the plough. No grown-up son or daughter, that's the way we're farming now. No work and little pleasure, was the cry before they went. Now they're getting both full measure, so I ought to be content. Great wages men are given in that land beyond the Seine, but 'tis lonely, lonely living when the childer is away. When the shadows do be falling on the old man there and me, 'tis hard to keep from calling, coming children to your tea. I can almost hear them coming, Mary Kate and little Con. Oh, but I'm the foolish woman, sure they're all grown up and gone, that their sins may be forgiven and not one go astray. Sure, I doubt I'd stay in heaven if them children was away. If them children was
Through the centuries, great dances and balls and banquets were held in the palaces of the crowned heads of Europe. But all of those have been forgotten years ago. But one was held here quite a time ago, and it'll be remembered for many centuries to come, believe me. It's hard to believe it in those little mud ruins on which I'm standing. Now, Percy French visited this area very often, and he stayed in a house up on the hill there with a certain family called the Godleys. And the episode that was to inspire his song is remembered by a friend of mine, Robbie Patterson, who lives in that house now. And this is how it went.
He happened to be here, entertaining the Godleys, and he heard about this Phil Riley. He heard about him being poor, and they called him Phil the Fluter.
Yeah.
He lived not very far from here, and Percy French heard about this ball they were getting up, or a hoolie as they called it, and he went to it. He come back up here to Godley's and he wrote the song, Fiddle Fluter's Ball.
Yeah.
And he sung it for the first time going to the station.
Well, the stories may vary about what happened in this mud and stone hut here, but Percy French's version went something like this. He said, and I'm quoting him verbatim, by the way, "I was staying in Drummichan at the time, which is the Godleys' home near Carrigallen. One evening, the Reverend James Godley came in after one of his long walks and told me how he had met the local flute player and how he had paid his rent. 'I've paid up all my arrears, your reverence,' says Phil the fluter, for as you may have guessed, 'twas himself that was in it. 'And how did you manage that?' said his reverence. 'Well, I give a ball,' says Phil. 'A ball?' said his reverence. 'Now, if my family asked me to give a ball, I'd have to put me hand in me pocket. And I think I keep it there,' he added thoughtfully. 'Ah, well,' said Phil, 'you'd make a hole in a couple of pound giving you a kind of ball, for you'd have to have a young lady to play the piano, and cake, and sandwiches, and other combustibles. Now, when I give a ball, I clean out me cabin, and I lock up any further drink in the cupboard. Then I put me hat behind the door, and the neighbours come in bringing their suppers with them. and each one putting a shilling or two in the hat. And this is the bit I like. Then I cock my leg over the dresser, I throw me top lip over the flute, and I twitter away like a hatful of larks, and there they stay, lepping like hares till 2 in the morning.
Have you heard the fellow fluter from the town of Ballymuck? The times are going hard with him, in fact the man was broke. So he just sent out a notice to his neighbours one and all as to how he liked the company that evening at a ball. When writing out, he was careful to suggest to them that if they found a hat of his convenient to the door, the more they put in, whenever he requested them, the better would the music be for battering the floor. With the toot on the flute and the twiddle on the fiddle, hopping in the middle like a heron on a cradle. Up, down, hands around, crossing to the wall. Oh, hadn't we the gaiety at Phil the Fluter's ball? There was Mr. Dennis Doherty who kept the running dog. There was little crooked Paddy from the Tirralocket bog. Boys from every barony and girls from every yard, and the beauty from Miss Brady's and the private ass and cart. Along with them came Bouncer Mrs. Cafferty. Little Mickey Mulligan was also to the fore. Rose Suzanne and Margaret O'Rafferty, the flower of Ballybunion and the pride of Petrivore. With the toot on the flute and the twiddle on the fiddle, up and in the middle like a heron on a cradle. Up, down, hands around, crossing to the wall. Oh, hadn't we the gaiety at Phil the Fluter's ball? First little Mickey Mulligan got up to show them how, and then the Woody Cafferty gets out and takes a bow. I could dance you off your feet, so she as sure as you were born, if you'll only make the piper play the hares in the corn. Phil plays up to the best of his ability. The ladies and the gentlemen begin to do their share. Faith and Mick, 'tis you that has agility, and we've got a Mrs. Cafferty, you're leaping like a hare. With the toot on the flute and the twiddle on the fiddle, up and in the middle like a heron on a cradle. Up, down, hands around, crossing to the wall. Oh, hadn't we the gaiety at Phil the Fluter's ball? Phil the Fluter tipped away to little crooked Pat. I think it's very time to see for passing round the hat. So Paddy passed the cobbing round and looking mighty cute. Says you got to pay the piper when he tootles on the flute. All join in with the greatest joviality, covering the buckle and the shuffle and the cut. Jigs were danced of the very finest quality, with the bait, the company at handle and the foot. With the toot on the flute and the twiddle on the fiddle, up and in the middle like a heron on a cradle. Up, down, hands around, crossing to the wall. Oh, hadn't we the gaiety at Phil the Fluter's ball?
Percy French was born in 1854, a matter of years after the great famine of Black 47 and Black 48 had literally decimated the countryside of Ireland. What was once a population of over 8 million, in a matter of years, was 3. Now, the other millions had either died or were forced to emigrate. Now, it's hard for us in this comparatively luxurious day and age in which we live to appreciate what was meant by emigration. But if you think of one small aspect of it, that in many parts of rural Ireland, when somebody from that area was emigrating, they would hold what were called then American wakes, because to them, genuinely, it was a time of deep, deep mourning. Now, Percy French was leaving on a tour of Canada, the United States, and the West Indies. Now, a little episode happened to him on board that ship. They were all standing along the rail, watching the coastline of Ireland receding further and further into the distance. And he happened to hear one young Irish lad remark to another, "You know, Mick, they'd be cutting the corn in Creeshla today."
Dear Danny, I'm taking the pen in my hand to tell you we're just out of sight o' the land. In that Grand Allen liner, I'm sailing in style, but I'm sailing away from the Emerald Isle. and a long sort of sigh seemed to come from us all when the waves hid the last bit of our Donegal. Oh, it's well to be you that is taking your take where they're cutting the corn in Creeshla today. There's a woman on board who knows Katie by sight, and we talked of old times till they put out the light. I'm to meet the good woman tomorrow on deck, and we'll talk about Katie from this to Quebec. I know I'm no match for her, no, not the least, with her house and 2 cows and her brother a priest. But the woman declares Katie's heart's on the say, while mine's with the reapers in Creeshla today. Goodbye to you, Danny, no more's to be said, and I think the salt water's got into me head, for it drips from me eyes when I call to my mind the friends and the calling I'm leaving behind. But still she might wait when I bade her goodbye. There was just the least taste of a tear in her eye, and a break in her voice when she said, you might stay, but please God you'll come back to old Creeshla someday.
We're here in Connemara, and below me there is the town of Clifton, with that lovely back cloth of the 12 pins. Now, a little bit of Percy French's heart always lay here. He lived in London for many years, but his sister was to write, although my brother had his headquarters in London for many, many years, he was, as his wife truly says, never anything but an onlooker on London life. His heart was always and ever with his dark Rosaline, even when he was at the very height of his popularity. His dark Rosaline was, of course, Ireland. Now, there were people, happily few, who thought that Percy French was laughing at and not with his own fellow Irish country people. And as most people really realise now, no patriot, no hero ever loved Ireland with a deeper, purer, more sincere love than he did. His love of Ireland was based on something quite different. He had absolutely no time for politics, religious bigotry, anything like that. And his affection was based on an intense love for the countryside of Ireland, just the land that is Ireland, the scenery, the beauty of it. And he carried on a lifelong love affair with the country people of Ireland. I've picked out a little piece of verse that I think just about sums up his emotions towards this land of his. And he called it To the West.
The Midland Great Western's doing its best, and the circular ticket is safe in my vest. But I feel that my holiday never begins till I'm in Connemara among the 12 pins. The bank has no fortune of mine to invest, but there's money enough for the ones I love best. All the gold that I want, I will find on the whins when I'm in Connemara among the 12 pins. down by the loch I shall wander once more, where the wavelets lap, lap round the stones on the shore, and the mountainy goats will be wagging their chins as they pull at the bracken among the 12 pins. And it's welcome I'll be, for no longer I'll meet the hard, pallid faces I find in the street, the girl with blue eyes and the boy with brown shins will stand for the pictures among the 12 pins. Tonight, when all London's with gaslighted gleam, and the Carlton is filled with society's cream, I'll be taking me tay down at old Johnny Flynn's, safe and away in the heart of the pins.
Those, of course, were original watercolours by Percy French himself. And in fact, when his love of art, all the way through his life, had some amazing results at times. For instance, when he was in that imposing job, as he referred to himself as an inspector of drains with the County Cavan Board of Works, his office must have been hilarious because the walls, the backs of doors, the ceilings, they all had paintings on them. And in fact, they existed in that house up till a short time ago. Now, in spite of his many talents, and believe me, he had many, he was to consider himself first and foremost a painter. And he freely admits as well it was the ever-changing backcloth of our Irish skies that fascinated him most. And he had a lovely thought about those same skies. His idea was that many of the great painters of the past really come down every now and then from paradise, and they lend their own distinctive touch to the beautiful sunsets and the beautiful sunrises.
When painters leave this world we grieve for the hand that will paint no more. But who can say that they rest alway on that still celestial shore? No, no. They choose from the rainbow hues, and winging from paradise, they come to paint, now bold, now faint, the tones of our sunset skies. When I see them there, I can almost swear that grey is from Whistler's brain, that crimson flush is Turner's brush, and the gold is Claude Lorraine.
Sadly, we haven't got time to go in depth into Percy French's life, but we do have time for a few little glimpses into it. For instance, he left getting married until well into his 30s, in fact. But when he did fall in love, he did it properly. He fell in love with a very beautiful girl called Etty Armitage Moore. And when he found out his wife was expecting a baby, believe me, his happiness was complete because he loved children. And in fact, he was to say himself, I was born a boy and I've remained one ever since. And in fact, if he arrived in a house where there were children, this is true, the adults could forget about him altogether. In next to no time, he'd be on all fours on the floor playing games with them, singing to them, entertaining them. And then later in life, when he did have children, he certainly knew how to communicate, even in letter. Here's a little letter he wrote to the children, and he could adapt his style to it. For instance, here it is, Friday. And he has, Dear girl mouse, which is what he called his daughter Joan. I saw waves, and it goes on, as big as a house. Can you swim like a frog yet? I am, horrible pun, coming back next week. And it finishes off, your loving father. Sadly, the day following their first wedding anniversary, his wife, Etty, or as he called her, his little ray of sunshine, died in childbirth. The baby only living for, I think it was a matter of a few days. Now, loving children as much as he did, as I told you, and loving his beloved Etty, he was absolutely shattered. His world just collapsed around him. And so quite naturally then, he ceased writing the frivolous little humorous love songs that he had been writing, and he reverted to a more reflective type of verse. Now, I came across one of those verses years ago, and I fell in love with it so much I had it set to music. And I only found out some time later the background to it, and that was that he'd been wandering some months after Etty had died around a beautiful little townland which lies in the southern part of County Galway, near Lough Ray. And wandering through that beautiful spot one day, he wrote this piece to his beloved Etty. And he called it after the townland where he was. It was called Gurt na Mona.
Long, long ago, in the woods of Gurt na Mona, I thought the birds were singing in the blackthorn tree. But oh, it was my heart that was singing, 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 with the joy that you were bringing, oh, my love, to me. Long, long ago, in the woods of Gurt na Mona, I thought the wind was sighing round the blackthorn tree. But oh, it was the banshee that was crying, crying, crying. And I knew my love was dying far across the sea. Now if you go through the woods of Gurt na Mona, you'll hear the raindrops creeping through the blackthorn tree. But oh, it is the tears that I am weeping, 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 for the loved one that is sleeping far away from me. Long, long ago, in the woods of Gurt na Mona, I thought the birds were singing in the blackthorn tree. But oh, it was my heart that was singing, 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 with the joy that you were bringing, oh, my love, to
It's said of Percy French that he rarely took life or himself too seriously. And what I like about him, I must admit, I'm very partial to his sense of humour, particularly his parodies. Now, he parodied many things, but especially I'm fond of his parodies of nursery rhymes. Now, what he would do was, he would take an ordinary common or garden nursery rhyme, and he would rewrite it as he visualised it might have been written by a famous poet. For instance, this is how he thought that earth-shattering epic, Little Bo Peep, might have been written by William Wordsworth. So here it is, Little Bo Peep by William Wordsworth. I walked with her upon the hill. Her grief was very deep. Her tears were running like a rill, for she had lost her sheep. What were they like, my gentle maid? Were they some special kind? They all had heads in front, she said, and all had tails behind. Their bodies were between the two, their mouths were full of teeth, and this perhaps may prove a clue. Their legs were underneath.
If they have legs, I cried with joy. Your tears you may refrain, for 'tis their legs they will employ to take them home again. Now, even in this day and age, believe it or not, matchmaking is still practiced. I think I would say it's practiced in agriculturally impoverished countries. Now, in Percy French's time, it was used quite a lot and had its practical uses. An instance of it would be, say, where you had two small neighbouring farms, and the owners of the farms would like to see them united into a larger unit. So what they tried to do was they tried to wangle to marry off the eldest son in one to the eldest daughter in another. And half the time, you know, the poor devils themselves had no say in the matter at all. Now, Percy French saw the potential humour in this, and he wrote this next little piece that tells of one farmer who's got a problem. And his problem is this. He's been left with two marriageable daughters on his hands. And the difficulty is this, that one of the daughters is very, very good looking, but her sister, I'm afraid, is no oil painting. So when he offers them in marriage to a young neighbouring farmer, with the good-looking daughter, he won't give any dowry whatsoever. But with her less fortunate sister, he decides he'll give a dowry of a heifer. And this is the way that the young farmer that they're offered to tries to work out the mathematics of the whole deal to see which will be his best proposition.
Now Mike Breen had two daughters, and each one in turn was offered in marriage to Jamesy O'Byrne. Now Kitty was pretty, but Jane she was plain, so to make up the differ, Mike Breen would explain. He'd give the best heifer he had in the land as a sort of a bonus with Jane, understand? But then Kitty would charm the birds off a bush, and that left the lad in a horrid nonplush. Now there's no denying Kitty was remarkably pretty, though I can't say the same for Jane. But still there's not the differ of the price of a heifer between the pretty and the plain. Entirely bothered was Jamesy O'Byrne. He thought that he'd give the schoolmaster a turn. Says he, to wed Kitty is very good fun, but a heifer's a heifer when all's said and done. A girl, she might lose her good looks anyhow, but a heifer might grow to an elegant cow. But still there's no price for the stock, do you mind? And Jane has a face that the devil designed. Now there's no denying Kitty was remarkably pretty, though I can't say the same for Jane. But still there's not the differ of the price of a heifer between the pretty and the plain. Now the schoolmaster said, with a great deal of sense, we'll reduce the two girls to shillings and pence. Add the price of a heifer, then Jane, I'll be bound, they'll come out on the top of a couple of pound. But still I'm forgetting that down in Glengall, sure the stock is just going for nothing at all. So Jim thought he'd wait till the end of the year, till girls might be cheaper or stock might be dear. But when he came for Kitty, she was married to McVitie, and McGee had appropriated Jane. So whether there's the differ of the price of a heifer is a thing that he never could explain.
When Percy French travelled throughout Ireland, he seemed to prefer to stay in private homes rather than hotels or guest houses. And the strange thing about it is they seemed equally at home in the lowliest thatched cottage or in the most lofty castle. For instance, now I'm here in Glenveigh, Donegal, and I'm going through the visitor's book, and as well as lauding the hospitality of the house, he finishes off showing a little drawing that he has obviously taken time doing, showing the butler coming out, reminding him that his jaunting car is waiting patiently to take him on his next trip. Over the pages here, I think this is a beautiful little piece. Very prophetically, he wrote this
in 1909. In fact, this was August the 28th. And he called it My Epitaph. And he has, "Remember me is all I ask, and yet, if the remembrance prove a task, forget." Even Percy French considered his most famous song to be "Where the Mountains of Mourne Sweep Down to the Sea." Now, so much folklore has grown around Percy French even now that in all good faith I've been shown so many locations in the Mourne Mountains where he was supposed to have written it. But his own words were, "I was standing on the strand at Skerries one clear afternoon." Skerries is precisely where I am now, only a matter of miles outside Dublin. And I continue. He says, "When I saw how the mountains of Mourne sweep down to the sea." Now, this line kept recurring to me till one day it wedded itself to an old Irish air. And the combination seemed so happy that I set to work, or rather, I shut myself up in my top room with pen, ink and paper and waited. Now, you'll probably have the gist from that, as indeed I did, that he went back to his digs and skerries here, or at least back to Dublin. But I found out sometime later that in fact it was while he was missing his beloved Ireland in London that he sat down and wrote this very satirical piece about the superficiality of London life. And he titled it, of course, "Where the Mountains of Mourne Sweep Down to the Sea."
Oh, Mary, this London's a wonderful sight, with the people all working by day and by night. Sure, they don't sow potatoes, nor barley, nor wheat, but there's gangs of them digging for gold in the street. Well, at least when I asked them, that's what I was told. So I just took a hand at this digging for gold. But for all that I found there, I might as well be where the mountains of Mourne sweep down to the sea. You remember young Peter O'Loughlin, of course. Well, he's over here now at the head of the force. I met him today, I was crossing the Strand, and he stopped the whole street with one wave of his hand. And there we stood talking of days that are gone, why the whole population of London looked on. But for all his great powers, he's wishful like me, to be back where dark Mourne sweeps down to the sea. There's beautiful girls here, but never mind, with beautiful shapes nature never designed, and lovely complexions, all roses and cream, as O'Loughlin remarked with regard to them same, that if at those roses you venture to sip, sure the colour would all come away on your lip. So I'll wait for my wild rose that's waiting